Hello, this is Professor Weisman's PowerPoint presentation designed to teach the remainder of the Criminology course remotely. It can be accessed on Blackboard and YouTube at Professor Weisman's CJ Courses channel. The presentations over the next several weeks will concentrate on basic psychological and geographical profiling of serial killers. This is Unit 2. In Unit 2 for basic psychological and geographical profiling of serial killers, we will explore the various definitions of serial killing, the methods employed by serial killers, the classification of serial killers, particularly motive typology and the crime classification manual, and the FBI's criminal investigative analysis method, which is a 6-step process. There are different definitions of serial killing. Law enforcement agencies, scholars, and the media have all defined the term differently, although the definitions do have similar characteristics. Moreover, serial murder is not formally recognized as a crime in and of itself in any federal or state penal code. One definition, and the one we can use throughout the course, is that serial killing, also known as sequential predation, is generally defined as 2 or more separate murders when an individual acting alone or with another commits multiple homicides over a period of time with time breaks between each murder event. Serial killing has also been defined as the unlawful homicide of at least 2 people carried out by the same person or persons in separate events occurring at different times. Another definition is that a serial killing is when a person murders 3 or more people, usually due to some abnormal psychological gratification, with the murders taking place over more than a month and including a significant period of time between them. Please note, however, that although psychological gratification is a common underlying motive for serial killings, and many serial killings do involve sexual contact with the victim, the motives of serial killers are varied and can include anger, thrill-seeking, financial gain, and attention-seeking. Moreover, we also know that the victims of serial killers may have something in common, such as race, gender, or gender identity, or sexual orientation. This means that serial killers generally murder a type of person, and that their actions are not usually against people randomly who do not fall into that type. Note that a serial murder is distinguished from mass murder, in which several victims are murdered at the same time and place, although I guess there can be a phenomenon known as serial mass murder. I suggest that this is generally perpetrated by a group or government rather than an individual, in other words, a genocide. Lastly, a spree killer is someone who kills 2 or more victims in multiple locations with almost no break in time between the murders. The major difference, of course, between the two is that typically serial killers have breaks, usually significant breaks, between each murder. The methods used by serial killers vary and can include poisoning, which is the method preferred by female serial killers, shootings, suffocation, strangulation, stabbing, drowning, bludgeoning, being axed, being burned, overdosing, and even running the victim over with a vehicle. And of course, there are more bizarre methods such as employed by Jeffrey Dahmer, who bored holes in some of his victims' heads and then poured chemicals into those holes directly into their brains. With respect to stabbing methods, note the term piquerism. Piquerism in connection with serial killing is a preference to use a knife or other sharp instrument for stabbing or mutilating a victim well beyond what is necessary to kill that person. Piquerism is usually an expression of extreme rage or hatred on one hand, or on the other hand, a form of sexual arousal stemming from penetrating another person's body with sharp objects. We can classify serial killers by motive typology and by crime scene analysis. It should be noted, however, that serial killers do not necessarily fall into a single motive or crime scene analysis, and many exhibit more than one type. Moreover, the classification does not necessarily explain the deep underlying reason or reasons that might actually lead someone to become a serial killer. There are four primary motives that are attributed to serial killers: visionary, mission-oriented, hedonistic, and power control-oriented. Many serial killers have mixed motives and can be classified with multiple motive typologies. The visionary kills on command of a hallucination. That is, the killer hears voices or has visions that direct him or her to do so. David Berkowitz, known as the Son of Sam, murdered 6 people in New York City from 1976 through 1977. He claimed that he received his orders to kill from a demon-possessed dog. The mission-oriented killer wants to rid the community of undesirables such as prostitutes, drug dealers, the homeless, those who are thought to be less than alive, the valueless. Gary Ridgway, aka the Green River Killer, was primarily a mission-oriented serial killer who murdered prostitutes because they were unclean. Hedonistic murder is subdivided into 3 categories: financial gain, a comfort killer; pleasure, lust killer; or simply those who enjoy the act, a thrill seeker or thrill killer. So, for example, thrill seekers are serial killers who enjoy attention from the media, and they also enjoy being pursued by the police. Sometimes they even send messages to the police or to the media, and many of them keep detailed records of their killings. Hedonistic lust killers get sexual gratification by controlling their victim, so this in essence can be viewed as a power control typology. Dennis Rader, known as BTK, bind, torture, kill, was active between 1974 and 1991 and killed 10 people in the Wichita, Kansas metro area. He sent taunting letters to police and newspapers describing the details of his crimes. Power and control serial killers enjoy their victims' terror, their suffering, the noises they make, and the screams that they make when they are being tortured. Many of these killers also sexually abuse their victims, but they are not necessarily motivated by feelings of lust. To them, rape is simply another form of dominating the victim. John Wayne Gacy assaulted and murdered at least 33 young men and boys. During the time of the murders, he remained active in his community, regularly performing at events as his own characters such as Pogo the Clown or Patches the Clown. This is why he is also known as the Killer Clown. The Crime Classification Manual, a standard system for investigating and classifying violent crimes, is a textbook on the classification of violent crimes, including murder and serial killing. The manual is a result of a project by the FBI's National Center for the Analysis of Violent Crime, and a second edition was published in 2006. A link to the second edition is on the slide. The manual divides homicide into 4 categories, each with subcategories. The 4 main categories are criminal enterprise, personal cause homicide, sexual homicide, and group cause homicide. So, to illustrate, criminal enterprise has various subcategories, including contract murder, gang-motivated murder, criminal competition murder, and kidnap murder. In connection with serial killing, the manual generally places such murders under the sexual homicide category, although, as explained previously, motivations of serial killers vary greatly and are not always sexual in nature. We will talk about the classification of serial killers in later units. Criminal investigative analysis is a method of profiling created by the FBI and is used to detect and classify the major personality and behavioral characteristics of an individual based upon analysis of the crime or crimes the person committed. Criminal investigative analysis involves a comprehensive 6-step process. As noted by Peter Vronsky in the textbook Serial Killers, The Method and Madness of Monsters, each step is critical to the overall system, so the quality of input at each step directly influences the subsequent steps. The next 6 slides will briefly describe the process. Step 1 is profiling inputs. This is where law enforcement gathers and then examines data about the crime scene, as well as the victim and witnesses. This may include photographs of the crime scene, autopsy reports, victim profiles, police reports, and witness statements. Step 2 is constructing a decision process model in which the basic nature of the homicide is established. For example, was the killing an individual murder, or perhaps the victim is one in a serial pattern? Step 3 is the crime assessment. This stage integrates the collected data into a model which classifies the murderer as organized or disorganized depending upon an analysis of the crime scene. More on this later. Here, the analyst might attempt to reconstruct the behavioral sequence of the crime, in particular, attempting to reconstruct the offender's method of committing the crime. Step 4 is the criminal profile. The profile is basically a report which attempts to describe the unknown subject of an investigation. The report may contain information regarding the offender's demographic characteristics, family characteristics, military background, education, personality characteristics, and it may also suggest to the investigator the appropriate techniques to adopt when interviewing or interrogating the suspect. Step 5 is the investigation of the suspect who is mentioned in the profile report. Step 6 is apprehension. If an arrest is made, then the written profile is compared to the actual identity of the offender, feedback is generated, and the VICAP database is updated with the results of the investigation to improve analytic capabilities to catch the next serial killer.